Hello and welcome to the Road Trip Sports Podcast. My name is Harrison Crook and I'm joined today by my co-host, Oliver Gilmour. Ollie, how are you doing?
I'm good, Harrison. We're back and hopefully better than ever. Different format this time around, but I'm super excited to get going with episode 1.
Well, thank you very much for mentioning the different formats. So we tried to start a podcast in 2018 around Road Trip Sports. Now, in 2018, when we started the podcast, it was when we were traveling to football training. We used to have to do a bit of a drive, and the road trip sort of signified our drive. Now it's sort of flipped a little bit. Now we enjoy traveling, we enjoy watching different sports at the venue. So we're going to talk a little bit about sports cities, about what you can see at all these different sports cities, what you can experience, what the fan experience is like, and what's the best way to attack it as a sports fan. So today we're going to talk about Green Bay. We're going to dive deep into Green Bay as a sports city. We're going to talk about the different attractions in the city. We're going to talk about what the game day experience is like. And we're also going to talk about the sports icon of the city. And we're going to end our podcast today with a little bit of a chat about the this week's in sports, the most recent sports events. We're going to talk about the conference championship games. But if you like this podcast, make sure you follow us on Facebook at Road Trip Sports Pod. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Road Trip Sports Pod. We're also on TikTok. Our TikTok expert, Mr. Gilmour, has been preparing lots of different videos to be posted over the coming weeks for the show. So if you like what you hear, make sure you follow us on all of the socials for all the updates about new episodes being posted and where you can find those episodes. But to start us off today, for those who don't know us or those who don't know our rooting interests, I thought we'd take this opportunity to introduce ourselves as sports fans, our favourite sports leagues we follow, our top 5 teams we root for, and our top 3 rivals. So, Ollie, what sort of sports do you follow? What are you interested in?
I'm into just about everything with the ball, but there's no better way to introduce yourself than by giving off your top 5 teams. So I'll let everyone know the teams that I root for. My top team, I'd say, would be the Green Bay Packers in the NFL, who we'll obviously get into a lot today. I also support the Carlton Blues in the AFL, the Golden State Warriors in the NBA. I'm a big Liverpool FC fan when I watch a bit of soccer, and the West Tigers, they're not a real good team, but you know they keep me going as well.
Got a bit of a spot for them as well. Now, I know the story, but I think it'd be great for our listeners to hear. It's quite a cracker of a tale. The reason why you're a Green Bay Packers fan, would you like to share that with us?
Sure thing. So, when I become a Green Bay fan, it was basically when I was about 7, maybe even 6 or 7 years of age. I went to a friend's house and his dad had the NFL on the TV. It was the Giants versus the Packers. And we're sitting there, we had no idea what was going on, and his dad was going for the Giants. And I thought to myself, what better way to get under his skin and support the Packers? So it just took off ever since then, you know?
You are a serial pest. Always the contrarian. So my top 5 sports teams, I'm very similar. Anything with a ball, I will follow religiously. In terms of sports, I love the NFL. That is my absolute favorite. Followed closely by college football. Growing up, how we met, we actually played AFL together for many, many years. So AFL will always have a soft spot in my heart. They're sort of my main sports. I dabble in a few others when I get the interest, but I'd say those 2 sports are my main sports. My top 5 sports teams, I am a die-hard Miami Dolphins fan. Plenty of people have tried to convince me to get off them, but I will never change because I enjoy the pain,
stubborn.
I guess.
You're stubborn.
I'm quite stubborn. My second favourite team is the Swans, the Sydney Swans. I've been a fan since I was little. The local AFL team, you'd call them.
Yep.
Living in Newcastle. Number 3 is Penn State. My family went for a visit there and watched the spring game there, so I've always got a soft spot for Penn State, followed by Real Madrid and the Baltimore Orioles. So they're sort of my top 5 sports teams.
I would just mention my rivals. I suppose they go hand in hand with who I support. I absolutely despise the Chicago Bears. I was talking to Harrison before the podcast, that their GM, who was hired last week, he's come out today and he said, you know what? We just want to win the NFC North. No mention of a Super Bowl. No high expectations. They just want to beat the Packers. So that just shows how much of a putrid organisation they are. I mean, Essendon's not too far off. And the Vikings after that, I'd say.
You know what about the Bears? When Aaron Rodgers hands in his papers and says, see you later, Green Bay, I mean, it's not that far out of the realm of possibility, is it? I mean, I don't think the Packers' reign will last forever, and I think the ending of the Rodgers era is that time for the torch to be passed. So I think you've got a bit to worry about there from the old Chicago natives. Now, my top three rivals, I cannot stand the New York Jets. Their fans infuriate me. The team sucks. They pretend they're good. They always try to bash my Dolphins, and they've got nothing to show for it. At least the Patriots were good. People always ask me, do you hate the Patriots? I don't. I respect the Patriots. At least they were good. At least they deserve my respect. The New York Jets deserve absolutely nothing.
See, I'm a bit different there because I don't despise the Lions at all. And for those of you that don't know, the Green Bay Packers share a division with the Detroit Lions. I just feel sorry for them. They're just... sometimes I wonder, I'm thinking, surely you just cut them a bit of slack and you know, they're not winning, so...
It's different, though, because the Packers are the Patriots of the NFC North. The Dolphins suck, too. But
right.
We don't suck as bad as the Jets, and they pretend like they're this much better team, much more well-run organisation than the Dolphins. It's like we're like the Vikings of the AFC East. We're kind of okay. We're just kind of okay. Yep. We go up and down, but we're kind of okay. And I resent the fact that the Jets think they're a good team. Anyway, my other two teams I don't like the big sound in the west of the town.
Salty from last year?
I do not like GWS. They do not play a style of football that I respect. And yes, I am salty from last year. Thank you very much. And I'll carry that for a very long time. And the other team I don't like is the Buffalo Bills. I think they've gotten way too confident in themselves. And they have not been that good for that long.
Fair.
So that sort of introduces us as sports fans, our rooting interests. You'll probably hear lots of digs about the Bears and Vikings and the Bills and Jets as we go on. But we're going to transition our way into the first city that we're going to cover. So each week we're going to cover a new sports city. And this week we're going to cover a place that Ollie visited very recently. Despite all the COVID restrictions, he managed to get out of the Australian prison and managed to venture to Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That's right. Yeah, I travelled to Green Bay in December of 2021 as a bit of a end-of-year graduation trip. It was on the bucket list, and I'm super glad I did it, and I'm really fortunate to talk about Green Bay today.
It's a really interesting city, isn't it? Because... obviously, I haven't been there, but from what I understand of it, it's a die-hard football city. We were talking about it before, and it's almost like the Dillon, Texas. If anyone who's watched Friday Night Lights, it's like the Dillon, Texas of the NFL. Do you want to tell us a bit about the history of Green Bay, where it's located, just a few facts about Green Bay?
Yeah, so Green Bay is a city in the United States, in the state of Wisconsin. It's best known as a small football town, as you mentioned, and it's home to the 4-time NFL world champion Green Bay Packers.
Now, some people say Ohio is the home of football, but there's others who would argue that Green Bay, with their 16 world championships, as you care to remind me often, yep. Some say that Green Bay is that spiritual home of football. With all their success, with them being one of the oldest franchises in the league, being established in 1919.
So just some fast facts just to bounce off you a bit there. Green Bay has 107,000 people, and it's the 207th 72nd largest city in the United States.
Now, I want to touch on that actually, because that's interesting. Like, usually you associate
Big cities, yeah.
big cities, their big markets is where they have the NFL teams. I mean, you've seen recently them moving out of the small markets of Oakland, San Diego, St. Louis to the bigger markets of Los Angeles and Las Vegas. It's an incredible testament to how passionate and loyal that fan base is, that there's never even been a whisper. Even the Chicago Bears are thinking moving out of Soldier Field, but there's never been a whisper of the Green Bay Packers moving out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, because they're that loyal, they're that diehard passionate there, which is why it would be such an interesting place to travel to if you're a sports fan and if you're an NFL fan. And you don't have a rooting interest, I think it'd be a fantastic place to visit.
Yeah, so Green Bay, for people that have sort of trying to picture this as they're listening, it's located north of Chicago, Detroit, Ohio, and just below the Canadian border. So if you're traveling to Canada or you're traveling to Chicago or if you're traveling to Detroit, it's close enough where I think you can make that 2 or 3 hour drive and go and see what Green Bay has to offer.
So do you want to take us through a bit of your trip? Because we've talked about it quite substantially. You were in Chicago before Green Bay, was it?
That's right, yes.
So you spent a bit of time in Chicago, and then how did you get to Green Bay from Chicago?
Yeah, so we travelled up via hire car to Green Bay, which I think was about a 2 or 3 hour drive. It may have been a little bit longer, but it's also from Chicago to Green Bay, you come across Milwaukee as well. So if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan, there's the opportunity to watch a game there or even just stop in and visit the city. But yeah, we travelled up in the morning and got there in the sort of the mid-morning and were fortunate enough to do a Green Bay Packers tour and visit their museum, which is world-renowned and was a great experience.
Yeah, well, take us through a bit more of that, because that was something, when seeing the photos, that was one of the biggest things I was interested in, was the tour. I love the stadium tours. I love learning the history. Take us through a bit of the stuff that they showed you on the tour.
Yeah, so part of the Hall of Fame as well, we're able to see all of the Super Bowl trophies, some memorabilia. I think the biggest thing for me, and this wasn't for everyone, obviously under the circumstances, but you're able to visit the walk past the locker room through the tunnel out to the field. And as I'm walking past to walk out onto the field, out comes Matt LaFleur, who is the Green Bay Packers coach, gives me a bit of a wave. I was a bit starstruck at the time, so I didn't get any photos. It's a bit, I don't know, Harrison believes me, but I'm telling you, it happened, and it was a good experience. But yeah, so walking out onto the field, you've got the ice on the field. I mean, if you go in there in December, which is usually corresponds with the time that football's on, there'll be ice on the field. There'll be people shoveling snow in the stands. And honestly, it's you don't really, especially being from Australia, you don't really experience anything like that.
That's why when I think about experiences that I want to do as a sports fan in the States, that's one of my bucket list ones, because we can't get that here. Not just the atmosphere in general surrounding an NFL game, because as we know, there's a different atmosphere in the States than there is in Australia. But experiencing something like that, the snow games, the tailgating, and I know we're going to get into that shortly about the game day experience in Green Bay. But just in that tour, it's amazing seeing all those old facilities, seeing how they've kept up a lot of the old traditions. I know you mentioned that they had bleachers. They're the only stadium in the NFL which still has bleachers. I mean, for a moment, the Los Angeles Rams played in the Coliseum, which I've actually been to, and the Coliseum does still have bleachers like that old style. But now that the Rams are in their new fancy SoFi Stadium, it's the only stadium with bleachers, which is a really interesting experience, it must be.
For everyone that isn't sort of aware of the bleachers that we're talking about, imagine you're back in primary school and they've got those metal seats. You know, probably everyone knows what I'm talking about, those metal seats. That's every seat in the entire stadium. So that gets cold.
I don't know about you. Was when I was at primary school, the silver seat was the big spot where you did not want to be sat. It was the threat from the teachers. They said, if you are in trouble, if you do the wrong thing, you are going to have to sit on that silver seat all lunch. It was a punishment in primary school.
Yeah,
and it surrounds the stadium. It's all you can sit on in Green Bay.
Some would consider it a punishment as well, but I just think that it's that because it's that cold. But I think you sort of embrace the moment, you know.
In the bleachers versus seats argument,
yep.
What side do you take?
It's a different experience. I think because it's an experience in itself, it's something that you really, really enjoy for the first couple of times. I think you'd have to speak to someone that's been to Green Bay on multiple occasions and visited multiple games to make a comment on which was better. But I think from a one-time experience, I think it's just nothing like it. That was why it was so special to me. Yeah,
of course. So there's lots of other things before we get to the game day experience, which I'm very excited to talk about. We have Titletown. Do you want to take us through what Titletown is? Because that's something where even NFL fans, I've heard of Titletown. I know that's everyone says Green Bay is Titletown. What actually is it?
Well, when we went, it was a bit shut down because the field was literally covered in snow. But they've got imagine a full-size football field. There's a 40-yard dash there. There's a lot of different football-style touristy attractions, like a bit of a kids' playground for all things football. So it's good for the kids. And I mean, when I went, you could call it overrated because it was just covered in snow. And I actually remember my brother going, "Is this it?" You know. But it's just something that all Green Bay and football fans just sort of love. It's like a playground for adults, even with the 40-yard dash.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm disappointed I didn't get to find out your 40 time. Well, let's get into the game day experience now. We'll start with the lead up to the game, the tailgating, and then I'd love to hear about the fan experience. Now, for those who don't know, you watched it was Green Bay Packers versus Chicago Bears, 2021. It was Sunday Night Football. It was a prime time game. Aaron Rodgers, take us through the lead up and then the atmosphere beforehand, and then obviously what it was like walking into that stadium, walking into the biggest and most historic stadium in football.
Yeah, so we started off. We travelled from a place called Appleton, which is about 30 minutes out of Green Bay, and obviously the preference is to stay in Green Bay, but the fact that it was such a prime-time game made it really difficult to get accommodation in Green Bay.
Gotcha.
So I don't think that that should deter anyone, by all means. I actually think that it worked out really well. So we caught a yellow bus. You know, you imagine your US school movies, and they've got those big yellow buses. We caught one of those, full of beer, mind you, and we travelled to the game about 5 hours early. And if you're probably thinking you haven't been to an NFL game 5 hours early, what am I going to do? But outside, you've got hot dogs. Everyone's cooking their own stuff. And when I say everyone's cooking their own stuff, I even think to myself, surely, you know, they're not going to share, or but it really is. It's an all-in atmosphere, and there was cornhole and everything you can imagine. And I think tailgating is one of the best things about football.
So what's the process? Because it might intimidate a lot of people who haven't had the tailgating experience. It's not something we get in Australia. What's the process? Do you just walk up and say, "Hey, give me some food," or how do you sort of get from that I'm a stranger to let's eat and chat Packers together?
Well, for our Australian listeners, I think it's a bit easier for us because we come over, "G'day, mate, how you going?" And they look at us like we're strangers.
They hear the accent and think, "Oh, I want to talk to this bloke."
Yeah, I mentioned it to a few people, and they were in awe that I'd travel from Australia to Green Bay or even to America. I don't think they'd seen Australians in years. So
it's interesting when you go to certain places in the States how little they've seen of Australians, and they think, "Oh, you're the first Australian I've ever met," and you're like, I would have sworn that people would be travelling here. I would have sworn that more Australians would be experiencing these things, like not just in the small towns, but in the big cities. When I went to Miami, like Texas, like you'd think there's some big places, like big holiday hubs for people. It's surprising the amount of people who haven't encountered anyone Australian, and it does get you sort of a foot in the door, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, the activities and the food they have is just fantastic. The best thing for me as an alcohol drinker and as a young bloke who enjoys a drink every now and then, they had big snowboards cut with little shot glasses in them, and encouraged everyone to come along and have a shot. Donate if you can, but literally they're just willing to accommodate for anything. And if you come and you don't want to spend anything, that they might not be as accommodating, but sometimes they ask for a tip. But most people generally just want you to enjoy the festivities with them and have a hot dog and have a beer and then enter into the football.
It sort of seems like a sort of family experience. It's like their big social event. It's where they meet people. It's where they form those bonds. And from my understanding, it's there's a lot of people who do it. There's a lot of people who that's the way they watch the games. That's the way they experience the games. They don't watch it at home. They don't even go into the stadium sometimes. They sit out there. They sit outside with their people, with the people who share that common interest, and they enjoy it in that way. I think that's incredibly fascinating and something I know we've talked about before, but it's something that Australia lacks. I know we always talk about how Australia is a sporting nation, and we love our sport. Don't get me wrong. I think the problem is we love too many of them, and there's not that intense passion where everyone in the city supports one team. Anytime I've walked through a city, wearing anything NFL when I've been in the States, you always get comments on it. Whether if it's the hometown team, you get people high-fiving, cheering, hugging you. If it's the opposition team, they'll give you a bit of a laugh, bit of a friendly banter sort of thing. It's not something we get as much here because I think we're much more contrarian. We're much more we don't have that same hometown passion. We don't have that same understanding that this is the sport that everyone follows. There's rugby league, there's AFL, there's lots of different options out there, and I think it'd be almost a bit strange if people started trying that in Australia. I know we've got our activities outside the stadium. Like I did a lot of work for the AFL, and there's lots of activities outside the Swans games for people to come up and partake in. But it doesn't encourage that social nature quite like the tailgating in the States. It's more just in your close-knit group, whatever group you've gone to the game in, that's who you get to experience those activities with, where in the States, it's very much encouraging that communal atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's something I'd like Australia to adopt, but with our...
Definitely,
with our open alcohol laws and all that sort of thing. And we don't really have... If you think about the MCG, you think about the SCG, there's not really any big, huge parking lot or big spaces. Definitely in Sydney, you struggle to get a park there. But there's nothing really like it. And I think that's why we've talked about Green Bay today, is because it's something that you don't get from an Australian city.
It's so different.
It is.
It's a completely different world, hey.
So in terms of the actual game itself, I mean, it was a fantastic experience.
Of course.
The Green Bay Packers ended up winning the game. And I mean, obviously... That was the preference. I mean, you never want your team to lose the game, especially to the Chicago Bears. You would have
been salty if you'd lost to the Bears. I remember talking to you beforehand. And you went to see some Warriors games, but you said if there's one, I'll take Warriors lose every single time as long as my Packers win. And so I'm so glad that did for you. And what a game to watch, wasn't it?
It was. Looking at it now, after the Packers have been eliminated by their special teams, it was the start. It was the start of the crumble. Really, I mean, their special teams were horrible. Blocked punts, punt returns and kickoff returns from the Chicago Bears. But all in all, the game was great.
When it's not a playoff game, it just makes it more exciting, doesn't it?
Well, that's it. Aaron Rodgers is willing to throw the game away to beat the Bears, but anyway.
Well, he still owns them, doesn't he?
Apparently so. I think hopefully for another year. Let me tell you.
So let me talk about. I want you to get into more of the what happened when you walked in. So before the game started, you done the tailgating. You decided, right, let's get in the stadium. Let's get ready to go. Talk us through it.
Yeah. So I remember, as I mentioned, the day before we went on the stadium tour, and the tour guide said, the first thing you're gonna notice if this is your first Packers game is the smell. And my first reaction was, is it going to stink? Like, what's going on? Do people
All
in
these
Green Bay reek?
sweaty Packers fans who've rugged up too much.
Is it going to smell like beer? But it was actually a really good thing. I walked into a waft of, Green Bay style food, particularly hot dogs and Kranskis and cheese and onions and barbecue. The thing is, it's a bit different to your Australian sort of sports behind the counter, your burgers that I've already made up, your meat pies, is that they were cooking them on barbecues and you just line up like as if it was in the middle of the walkway, and that was why it was just a different experience. Yeah,
that sounds incredible. And like, I think food, and I know we're going to get into it a little bit afterwards. I know we've got some fan questions coming up.
Yep.
Later. But the food is such a big part of the Green Bay experience, and some stadiums have that more than others. I know when I went to Miami, it was a bit less of that. But talk us through the food. What food you eat? What food you enjoy? Did you have any recommendations from the people around you or the Green Bay locals as to what to try?
Well, it's funny because that smell that I mentioned when I first walked in, that was all I needed. I just walked straight up to the first.
I'll take 3, please.
That was it. Walk up to the first sausage stand you could see. Foot-long sausage with onions and sauerkraut. And I just said, give me whatever you got. Give me whatever the Green Bay locals are having. And that was a really good experience. Head to your seat, sit there, eat your hot dog, and they put on the big screen while you're waiting for the game. The other games that are on during that time, and you're watching there, the excitement sort of building up. The players come out, and
who are they cheering for?
I think
what games are on, and who are the Packers fans cheering for?
I think from memory, actually, I can't quite remember who the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were playing, but as you can imagine from the earlier NFC Championship loss, yeah, it was just, if they lose, we're happy. So I think that was what everyone was just tuning in on that, and then
the anyone but sort of game.
That's it. That's
whoever's playing the Bucks.
Yeah. So overall, the game was a really great experience, and I think obviously each individual game is going to be different, but it's got that atmosphere. You're in the cold, and it was minus 12 degrees and minus 12 degrees Celsius.
Yep. Okay.
Which is, I think it felt like minus 15 degrees, and you're probably thinking, oh, that's not it for me. But
that's not even the worst of it. Yeah, it wasn't even snowing. It wasn't the Ice Bowl game. But it's like we said before, it's that experience. It's the thing that you can't get in Australia. I remember it was a couple of years back. It was an AFL game. I think it was in Canberra. And it made so many headlines because it was the first time in however many years that it snowed in a game in Australia. Meanwhile, it's every week in Green Bay.
That's it. And see, that minus 12 to 15 or whatever it was at the time wasn't cold for Green Bay. And we're like, oh, it's a bit cold here. We've got the big face mask things on. We've got beanies on. We're 40 different layers, which I'd recommend, mind you. But everyone was just like, it's not cold. Guys with no shirts on.
Did they have the big
G?
On the big G?
The big G, yep. So yeah, I
love that.
It's just a real big time experience that I'd recommend for everyone. And even if you're not a football fan, which we've actually got a question in regards to that a bit later. But even if you're not a football fan, the city does cater for everyone. And my brother's not a big football fan by any means, and he travelled with me, and he really, really enjoyed it.
But that's an experience. Like, going to a Green Bay is such an experience. It's not just a football game, is it? It's the shared experience of seeing something so historic that I think it draws a lot of people in and does cater to the non-sports fan or non-hardcore, die-hard Green Bay Packers fan. It's something that a lot of sports fans want to enjoy, and it's something that even non-sports fans can enjoy as well. Is there any more? We're just about finished our chat about experiencing Green Bay and about your trip. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that game day experience, about watching the Packers game? Is there anything else you want to share?
I think we've sort of covered it. The trip to and from the game and the tailgating is almost as good as the game itself. The experience around everything is just fantastic, and I'd
How
recommend
late was
everyone
the
gives
night?
it a go. I think the game finished at about 11:30. We arrived home at about 1:30.
Yeah.
We made a couple of stops to some bars on the way home for some
I don't doubt.
some rowdy Packers fans, but yeah, no, it wasn't
Stumbled
too
home,
ridiculous.
I guess.
Yeah, because they've got to cater for the West Coast audience who are a couple of hours earlier, and the East Coast audience who's an hour later. So they generally don't have it at too bad times.
Not like
in Green Bay.
East Coast sort of Sunday night football game.
Yeah,
no.
that's it.
All right, so that's it for talking about the experiencing Green Bay segment. Now, each week we're going to talk about the sports city and what the experience is like. Now, Green Bay as a city, it doesn't cater to other sports as much, does it? Now, a lot of the other cities we're going to talk about all the different sports and all the different attractions you could do for all the different sports.
Yep.
But Green Bay is such a football city, isn't it?
It is, and for the non-football fans, this is just for you. This is a bit of a taste as to what we could get into. When you think about other cities like Chicago that we may get to in the future, you think Michael Jordan, the king of basketball there, and we'll obviously touch on different sports as well, and we'll even touch on some non-American and Australian sports, and we'll hopefully continue to move around the world. I'm sure we'll get to Europe at some point, and it won't all be about football, but being so close to when I travelled to Green Bay, I think it's ideal to talk about it
It's
early.
a very relevant first episode to talk about as well, being so recent and hearing all those stories you've got about the game day experience. I think it's very valuable that we did this one first to sort of get all those experiences.
Should we get cracking with the icon of Green Bay?
I think we should. Now, I'll take the reins introducing this segment. So each week, we're going to have a little bit of debate, a little bit of discussion about the icon of a city. We're going to talk about the greatest sports person to have an impact on a city. Now, what that means is we're not looking at their entire career. So we're going to talk about someone who may have had a couple of stops in New York and Minnesota.
Yep.
A little bit later. Hint for those people who are paying attention. But we're going to talk about their impact to the city itself. We're not going to be talking about their impact on the sport as a whole. It's just in that city. Now, the person I was hinting at before definitely did have a great impact on Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, for most cities, we're going to be discussing different sports, the differences between the different icons in different sports. For Green Bay to start, it is a football city. So we're going to be talking about, ideally, not just the icon of Green Bay, but the icon of the Green Bay Packers. Now, we've got 3 finalists and we've got 1 winner. Do you want to take us through the finalists?
Yep. So, would you like me to talk about the 3 finalists and keep the winner till the end, do you think?
I think keep the winner till the end.
Let's do that. So, the first one that comes to mind that we debated about for a little bit, but we think there's a bit of there's a thing to having a presence on the football field as well, especially for fans. But Vince Lombardi, arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time, only a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, mind you, but part of the NFL's 100th anniversary all-time team.
I think to talk on the Coach of the Year point, when you look over who wins Coach of the Year,
it's always the rising stars. Yeah,
it's almost the coaching rising star award.
That's
if it was
it.
the Coach of the Year, Belichick would have 20 of them.
Well, that's right. Yeah,
But it would get quite boring saying every year the winner of Coach of the Year, Bill Belichick.
yeah. So
I almost did my Bill Belichick impression then. So I don't think that can be held against him as much, but something that's definitely in his favour, 2-time Super Bowl champion, and whenever anyone raises that trophy, they don't raise the Super Bowl trophy, they raise the Lombardi.
That's it. And he'll forever be well, hopefully they're not going to change the name. I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Not a chance. It's as much part of football history as the Super Bowl itself.
That's it.
Now, in addition to his 2 Super Bowl championships, he also won 5 NFL championships. Now, these aren't really as much celebrated these days as as Super Bowl championships, but it was still an incredible achievement. Obviously, at the time, the NFL was the premier the premier football league. The AFL, obviously, I'm talking about the American Football League when I say AFL. The AFL was still sort of kicking off. It was sort of getting established, but the NFL was the Premier League, so it is such a great accomplishment. Five-time NFL champions.
That's it. I think we can... Are you happy to move on to the next finalist?
I think so. I think we've just about covered Vince Lombardi. Obviously, has a great impact on the league. He is a Green Bay Packers member of the Hall of Fame. He's an all-time legend. I don't think there's much more to say. He's... would you say he's the greatest coach of all time? I think there's an argument.
I think so. There's an argument for sure.
I will always argue Don Shula.
Okay.
But that is me being a biased Dolphins fan. I think there's a few answers that people could give that could all be seen as correct in the right context. And I think Vince Lombardi is definitely one of those coaches where the argument is there and it's a clear argument and it's quite a strong one. So I think he was a very worthy finalist for the iconic Green Bay. We've gone a different direction, but for the moment, let's introduce the next finalist. Who we got?
So we have Reggie White. He spent 6 seasons in Green Bay, all of which he was a Pro Bowler. He won the Defensive Player of the Year award in 1998 and was part of the Super Bowl winning team in 1996. Now, for those of you who don't know Reggie, he was a smash-mouth defensive lineman and is still considered one of the best to ever have done it.
He was absolutely unreal. Widely considered as well the best free agent signing of all time. I'd say the only one, there are probably 2 other names that you could really argue with, and both of them are quarterbacks. So definitely the greatest non-quarterback free agent signing of all time. I think the only other 2 arguments would be Peyton Manning to the Denver Broncos and Drew Brees leaving San Diego for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know actually how he was recruited to the Green Bay Packers.
Interesting story. Yeah. I remember we watched it the other day. We watched the America's Game on the Green Bay Packers of 1996. Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, so imagine I'm the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Reggie White is a free agent. And a week earlier, Reggie White has come out and said, you know what? God will tell me who I play football for. And... So the head coach of the Green Bay Packers calls up Reggie White, leaves a voice message on his mobile and says, hey, Reggie, you're going to play for the Green Bay Packers. It's God, and then hangs up.
What a story. And he ended up playing there as well. I'm sure it's something they laugh about to the day.
I'll just say that the reason... He had such a profound impact in Green Bay, but the reason why we probably didn't have him as the winner here was just because he only spent 6 years in Green Bay. He's certainly a candidate worth mentioning, but his short tenure I think it wasn't quite enough when you're going against the other finalists and the eventual winner here. Yeah,
for sure. Now, the other candidate we've got, do you want to talk a little bit about the next one?
So it's a bit of a drum roll moment, but we've decided that the finalist, not the winner here, another finalist is Brett Favre. So he spent 16 seasons with the Green Bay Packers, was a 3-time MVP and a 1-time Super Bowl champion in 1996. He was 11-time Pro Bowler and part of the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame with his number 4 jersey retired with the organization.
And what a legend he was.
He's a bit
sort of like the original Patrick
Mahomes. That's what I was going to say.
For people who haven't watched as much football in the past, the gunslinger type, I'm going to make this throw, I'm going to put it on him no matter what body position I'm in, no matter how much I'm going to get absolutely smacked by the defender, I'm going to make this throw, whether it's intercepted or not. Definitely took a lot of risks.
Yep.
Especially early in his career, it was something he was criticised for. Towards the later end of his career, it started to pay off, especially in the Super Bowl. All those risks, they were a bit more calculated risks later in his career. Brett Favre was someone that I was really arguing for when we were talking about this pre-show. We were discussing Brett Favre and the eventual winner, and the only thing that sort of swayed us was that personally, we're still young. I'm 24. You're 23.
Yep.
We didn't get to see Brett Favre's prime. We sort of saw the tail end of it. I've got many fond memories of the tail end. Even in his Minnesota run, not so much the Jets. He didn't really do much in that season, but his run with the Minnesota Vikings, he got them very close to the Super Bowl. When I picture Brett Favre, I almost picture that just as much as I do the Packers, just because I didn't get to experience that. Being such a young football fan, and in Australia, it's hard to watch football, especially at that age. The internet and the streaming as it's evolved has really helped our countrymen discover the sport. So it was very hard decision, but just because we didn't grow up with Brett Favre, we went with our other candidate. But if you think Brett Favre is the icon of Green Bay, it's certainly something that we'd agree with the argument. That it'd be a fair argument to make. And if you think you can make the argument, and if you think that Brett Favre is the icon of Green Bay, make sure to let us know in the comments of one of our posts on one of the socials. Make sure you let us know. Tell us why you love Brett Favre. Tell us why you think he represents Green Bay and why he represents the Green Bay Packers. But he is not our winner.
He isn't.
Now, I think for anyone who knows you personally, they would have a pretty good idea about who our winner would be.
That's it. I don't think it's
someone
so much.
you are very much a fanboy of.
I don't think it's biased at this point.
I think there is going to be quite a few tears in a few weeks when he announces he's going to take his talent to South Beach.
Mate, you can dream. Dream all you want.
The icon of Green Bay is
Aaron freaking Rodgers. So
number 12.
Big number 12. So
take us through a bit of the history of Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay.
Yeah, so he was selected 24th overall by the Green Bay Packers in 2005. And I'm sure we'll talk about it in a second. Slid all the way to pick 24. He spent 17 seasons in Green Bay and I'd like to think, is the soon-to-be 4-time MVP, 11-time Pro Bowler, and 1-time Super Bowl champ. Hopefully we can make it another one, but hopefully we can win another one. But
should have been this year.
It's getting grim.
It should have been this year. This year was the year. I don't think there's going to be a chance as good as it. He'd have to play. I mean, I'd say he'd have to play out of his mind, but that's what he's been doing the past 2 years, and he still hasn't got it done. Going back to more the start of his career, it was an interesting start of his career. He was sort of being talked about as the first overall pick, a California boy. He wanted to play for his hometown Niners. They were his favorite team growing up, and they had the number 1 pick. But what did they do? They picked Alex Smith. Now, hindsight is 2020, and we do see now that Rodgers probably would have been the better pick, and they probably would have got a couple of Super Bowls with Rodgers at the helm. Alex Smith was very much a serviceable quarterback through his time.
He was safe.
He was very safe, that was the upside to Alex Smith. But it was also the stuff that brought his teams down and didn't allow his teams to take that next step. It was one of the reasons why Harbaugh went with Colin Kaepernick in their Super Bowl run to Super Bowl 47. He thought that Kaepernick could give them that spark that Alex Smith couldn't. It's also why Patrick Mahomes eventually replaced Alex Smith when he made his way to Kansas City. That was sort of the brush he was painted as. But Aaron Rodgers was that guy with that spark. And it took a couple of years to come out. He sat behind Brett Favre for a couple of years, learning at the knee of one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. How much do you think that helped him in his development as a quarterback? And what do you think about the argument? You see a lot of first round quarterbacks come in so early these days. They come straight into the lineup. They get thrown to the wolves, and a lot of first round quarterbacks are failing at the moment. What do you think of the value is in sitting and learning behind one of those established names?
Well, I think it works so well that was the reason that the Packers have selected Jordan Love 10, 15 years later, because Rodgers was able to sit behind Favre, learn from Favre, and Favre wasn't happy about it, and I don't think Rodgers is happy that Love's sitting behind him at the same time. But
it was really interesting actually. The other day I was watching the America's game. I really love America's game. If anyone hasn't caught on, I was watching the America's game. It was the Packers Super Bowl. It was interesting because he was talking, because the Packers Super Bowl, they won pretty soon after he took over as quarterback, and he was talking about sort of speculating on what Brett Favre would have been feeling. And he suggested, Brett Favre probably didn't like it too much. He probably was pissed, but Rodgers wanted to prove himself as a quarterback. And it's interesting now that Rodgers has had that role reversal where he's in the Brett Favre role. He's the established veteran now, and he's getting to experience that himself now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for the reasons that we didn't select Brett Favre is the reasons that we've also selected Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they have pretty similar resumes here, but just Aaron Rodgers being a part of our era, obviously being my quarterback, he's probably been the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers pretty much the entirety of my fandom for them, and I associate Aaron Rodgers with the Green Bay Packers. I do associate Brett Favre with the Green Bay Packers, but at the moment, being our era, I'd say be my favourite player of all time, and giving me so many different moments, ups and downs, a lot of downs more recently, but at the same time, he's still brought us some positive records over time and that one Super Bowl championship.
Yeah, I think he's a great choice for the icon. He's definitely someone who's very much associated with the Green Bay Packers, and the Green Bay Packers are associated with him. Now, before we move on, I think the biggest question has to be, and it's a question I know that we've talked about quite a lot.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers, 2022. Where's he playing football?
It's hard because I've sort of always thought that he'd stay in Green Bay, but I honestly just think everything's riding on this decision. I thought at one point his decision would rely on contracts like Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith and Devonta Adams and Montez Valdez-Scantling and all the other players around Green Bay, but everything's been put on hold for Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's going to get a better situation sort of team-wise. Whether he's after a different location, obviously Harrison's Miami Dolphins are an option. I don't want to give him too much here. And he's been rumored to go to the Denver Broncos.
I think that's as much as I would love to see Aaron Rodgers wearing the beautiful teal and orange. I think that the signing of Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach, the former Packers offensive coordinator, I think that that's the play. I think that it's a relationship that's established. It's a team that's on the rise. They've got some pieces there. They've got some capital there to make some moves. And I think that if Aaron Rodgers wants to squeeze open that Super Bowl window a little bit, I don't think it's in Green Bay. I think it is in the Mile High City. All right, that's it for our chat about the icons of Green Bay. But before we finish up, we just want to talk about the top 5 Aaron Rodgers moments for you as a fan. Number 5.
So number 5 for me was actually occurred this year, and this was when Aaron Rodgers threw a touchdown pass to Alan Lazard to break the Green Bay Packers touchdown record.
The funny thing is that was 2 weeks after saw them. It was the very next home game that he got the record.
Yeah, so I mean that's my number 5 moment. And just before we continue, we're going to post on our socials videos of all of these moments back to back. It'll be a great TikTok video, but also it'll just give you a bit of a visualization as to when this occurred, how it occurred, and sort of how the fan reaction and everything that went into it as well.
Getting onto that social cut through. Number
Check it
4
out.
moment. Iconic Aaron Rodgers moment in Green Bay.
Yeah, so one of the most iconic Aaron Rodgers moments for me was he got injured against the Bears, went to the sideline, limps back onto the field on one leg, and throws a huge touchdown. I mean, it was, as you'll see from the video when we posted, it was all Randall Cobb with that play, but just
very much so.
It was the icing on the cake, and beating the Bears. I mean, there's nothing better than it, and beating the Bears under those circumstances was just unreal.
It sure was. Number 3, most iconic Aaron Rodgers moment.
So number 3 for me is the versing the Detroit Lions, his huge Hail Mary. Now, Harrison would argue this is above the next one that I'm going to talk about, but the reason why I put the next one basically ahead of it was just because this one, it was the back-to-back Hail Marys, which I'll explain in a second, which I probably suppose I should tie in the second moment now.
I think so.
Yeah, so
the second moment in most iconic Aaron Rodgers moment is?
So it was his back-to-back Hail Marys against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, unfortunately, we lost that game, but just the throws he made, the catches. I mean, you could argue that it was all in the catch, but to put the ball where he put the ball twice, and it was just an unreal moment.
I think so. I think that, honestly, there's an argument to be made for either. I think they're probably on the same level. I remember watching that Detroit game. That throw went forever.
Yes.
It was one of the longest throws I've seen completed in a game. And it obviously, to be the game winner, it wasn't a playoff game, but it was a game-winning pass. I think they're just about even. I think whichever way we went, we're going to anger some people. So if you've got a different opinion, make sure to let us know on the socials what your most iconic Aaron Rodgers moments are. Now, this one might be obvious to some, but what is the most iconic Aaron Rodgers moment?
Now, it's not too exciting. It's not the most visually appealing pick unless you're or video or a play or whatever you want to call it. But it's not the most visually appealing play if you're not a Green Bay Packers fan. But Aaron Rodgers takes a knee to take the Super Bowl back to Green Bay. Super Bowl 45. Against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Now, it had been quite a time since the Green Bay Packers had last won a Super Bowl. I mean, it took a long time from the first 2 Super Bowls. They won the first 2 Super Bowls. There was quite a drought. Brett Favre won it in 96. And then it took all the way until the 2010 season. Obviously, the Super Bowl played in 2011, but it was the 2010 season where the Green Bay Packers defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 45. And what a game it was. What a performance by Aaron Rodgers. And the only sad thing is that I remember at the time people were saying first of many.
I know.
And I know it's heartbreaking for you that unfortunately it is the first and quite possibly the only Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl win. It's so hard to win a Super Bowl, especially when Tom Brady's out there being so dang selfish, taking them all. So, unfortunately, Tampa Tom kicked your butt last year, stole one out from under you. Unfortunately, the Niners, Kyle Shanahan got you again. It's been quite an unfortunate run. It's been a great run. It's been a successful run. And it's just a bit of a shame that you haven't got more. Now, that's it for our top 5 Aaron Rodgers moments. Make sure to check out the videos on our socials with all of the top 5 moments. We're going to move into fan questions now. Now, as a very new podcast, obviously we're building a following. So we're going to post before each episode, we're going to post a little fan questions post so that you can engage with us, so that you can ask any questions you may have about the city we're going to talk about next week. Now, the city we're going to talk about next week, it's going to come out on our socials very soon, but we're going to talk about down south. We're going to take our talents, we're going to take our podcast to Miami, Florida, to South Beach. Now, so we're going to talk all things Miami football. So make sure you look out on the socials for our post about fan questions for the Miami podcast. But for today, we've had to go to the old parents' well for the questions. So this question comes in from Rob, my father from Warners Bay, Australia. And he asks, how do you survive the cold in Green Bay? Obviously, it's one of the most famous things Green Bay has attributed to it is the cold, is the brisk weather, is the conditions, obviously the ice bowl. There's been many situations where it's been a snowy, icy, bitterly cold game. How did you survive the conditions?
It's all about layers.
Layers?
All about layers. So all you want to do is get your thermos together, get all your warm coats, jackets, and once you think you got enough jackets, just chuck a couple extra in just to make sure. But it's all about layering up, getting your Green Bay Packers gloves, scarf, beanie, and just covering up everything pretty much. But, I mean, when you're watching the game, you'll survive it. If you're not watching the game, get inside and enjoy what Green Bay has to offer, I say.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I've got a question. We've both got partners who aren't as passionate about sports as us, and in order to convince them to go on an icy cold trip to Green Bay, we definitely need some non-football related activities. So what are some non-sports or non-football related activities to do in Green Bay? What's there to do for the non-football fan?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really enjoyed when visiting Green Bay was the Badger State Brewing Co., which is a small boutique beer or brewery about 500 meters away from the stadium. So you could even tie that. We actually tied it in with our visit to the Green Bay Stadium the Lambeau Field the day earlier. We did our tour, headed over there for a few beers, and that was awesome. So I'd thoroughly recommend that.
Yep.
They also have attractions for the kids, such as the Bay Beach Amusement Park, the National Railroad Museum, and everyone loves food, or at least I like to think they do. Maybe not as much as us sometimes, but at least not the American barbecue. But
yep.
So they offer cheese tours, but also a lovely selection of your American style barbecue, your smoked meats, all of that sort of thing, and just check out some restaurants on TripAdvisor, and if you really would like some recommendations and you're heading there, feel free to send us a message and I'll provide a couple of places. But you really can't go wrong. So just enjoy the food, enjoy what Green Bay has to offer. There's certainly a lot of things for people that aren't football fans at the same time.
I think it's very much as well a small town USA sort of experience. I know that I've been to the States quite a few times now, and the big cities can get old. I know we've talked in the past about LA. Once you've done the touristy things, there's not real much to do there. It's not as inviting. And so once you've experienced a lot of the cities and once you've done the tourist traps, I would always recommend find some small towns. Find some small towns that you can visit to give you that taste of rural America, because that's the America that you're going to remember. That's the experiences you're going to talk about and you're going to tell everyone about, because no one wants to hear about your trip to the Statue of Liberty, because everyone's done that. But people love to hear about stories about you going to this small town, you're not knowing what to do there, and you're sort of figuring it out on the way around. They are the stories that I think are the most important.
I also think that when you're traveling to cities like New York, Los Angeles, Miami, everywhere, you've got those big cities, you need a little bit of even downtime. You can use Green Bay as your downtime. So we'll just I think you got to include it as a small city. I think, as I mentioned a bit earlier in the podcast, it's close enough to Chicago, Detroit. And I'd personally make the trip there if you've listened to this podcast and thought, you know what, that's for me. But with COVID and stuff, you may have to listen back to this in a year or so. And as our borders open up, everyone start putting together a list of places that you want to go and add Green Bay to your list. That's all I'd recommend.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Well, that's it for our chat about Green Bay. We've answered the question now, and we're going to have a quick little chat because we are running low for time. We're going to have a quick chat about the championship games that have just happened on the weekend. Obviously, this segment of the podcast is just going to be a quick segment at the end to address this week in sport, and it's something for us to interact with our fans about the current actions in the sports games. Now, championship games. Let's start with the early game, the Bengals versus Chiefs game. What did you make of it?
For those of you that don't know, the Bengals took that one out.
So the score was 27-24. The Chiefs held a 21-3 lead at one point in the game. The Bengals stormed back with avalanche of unanswered points, 21 unanswered points to take the lead, 24-21. The Chiefs kicked a field goal right at the end. There was a bit of a discussion. I know there was an argument online about Tony Romo's comments and whether the football logic he provided was sound. He said that potentially the Bengals should let them score there, which I think most people would disagree with. You never want to let them score and have to score your own touchdown with 40 seconds left.
Yep.
So the Chiefs went on to kick the field goal. The game went to overtime, and everyone was worried about a similar situation happening where the Chiefs win the toss, they go down the field, they score the touchdown, and Joe Burrow and the Bengals don't get a chance. But 3rd and 10, trying to force a Tyreek Hill, throws the pick. Bengals drive down the field. They win the game, score the field goal. Final score, 27-24. I think it was a great football game. Didn't quite reach the heights. It was hard to that the Chiefs-Bills game reached in terms of spectacle, in terms of entertainment value. But it was incredible to see the Cincinnati Bengals, for the first time since the 80s, reach the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think the thing that I noticed from the game and watching it and even looking at the stats afterwards is that you really expected Jamar Chase to go for his 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 catches, but they were able to negate him a little bit. That is the Chiefs' defense. But other guys stepped up, and when you're contending for a Super Bowl, you need all of your guys to step up and get the job done and get you that win. So props to the Bengals, props to Joey Burr. Joey Ice. And he's looking to be the first ever player to win a Heisman, National Championship, and Super Bowl, if you didn't know that.
Incredible. And I think that it's come out recently on some of the Dolphins pages that they tried to trade up in the draft for Joe Burrow. They were offering all 3 of their 2020 first-round picks, including a 5th overall, and potentially extra. I think that there wasn't enough they could have given. They could have given every pick they have for the next 10 years, and I think it still wouldn't be enough. You get that quarterback in place, you get that guy, there's nothing else as important.
Yeah, and shout out to Jack, as I mentioned before, that quick little stat for you. Cam Newton was the only... He went to do that, but lost the Super Bowl, so unlucky Jack, unlucky Cam Newton. Let's see if Joey Burrow can get it done.
Maybe Joe Burrow might fall on a fumble after being sacked by Von Miller, who'll be in the game after his Los Angeles Rams, the team he was traded to mid-season, defeated the 49ers, finally got that monkey off their back, 20-17. Another close game, another great game. It took a comeback from the Rams as well. They were down 17-7 at one point in the game, but Cooper Kupp, take a bow. The big man in the big spot makes the big moment happen. I think that was incredible.
I think he's putting up a case. Certainly arguable that he is the best wide receiver in the NFL at the moment.
I think
I'm
he's
biased.
putting up a case this has been the greatest wide receiver season of all time.
Megatron just didn't have the playoffs.
Including playoffs, He and Deebo Samuel both overtook Jerry Rice for the most yards in a season, including the playoffs. And obviously, Deebo Samuel's season has now ended. Cooper Kupp, who is already first, is bound to increase that total, you would imagine. I think it's been one of the greatest wide receiver seasons of all time. I still can't believe that I had him in my fantasy squad. I had Deebo and Cooper Kupp, and I somehow lost the fantasy football championship game. I still don't know how that happened.
We need sound bites. Need to get in there. 'Cause that's sad, mate.
It's
nothing
embarrassing.
worse.
I played in 2 fantasy football championship games, and I lost them both. And I will carry that for a very long time.
So just to recap, the Rams beat the 49ers 20-17, and they head to their hometown, not real far. Their home stadium. Just they can sleep in their own beds. They're versing the Bengals.
Now, technically, they are the away team. Based on NFL rules, the odd Super Bowl numbers, the AFC is the home team. So it's going to be weird for the Bengals being in the home locker rooms of the Los Angeles Rams as they prepare to face them. I wonder if the Los Angeles Rams are going to leave any presents in there for them.
Maybe. I've heard some interesting stories about that happening in the past.
For sure. I think the last thing to chat about in this game is Matthew Stafford. Almost a year to the day after being traded from the Detroit Lions. He got out of the Motor City. He's playing under the bright lights of Hollywood. And in his first year there, he wins 3 playoff games and takes the Rammies to the Super Bowl. I know you've got your opinions on Matthew Stafford being a NFC North fan.
Yeah.
But I think that most people agree with me that it's a fantastic story. And whichever team wins, I know people have their rooting interest, but I think that this is one of those rare Super Bowls where whoever wins, I think the majority of football fans win. Either Matt Stafford, a sort of down on his luck quarterback, playing with the Lions. There's the story there. Or Joe Burrow winning his Super Bowl in his second season, being the first to win a Heisman, a Natty, and the Super Bowl championship. I think that would be a fantastic effort from Joe Burrow. And on that note, that is it for us today for our first episode of the revamped Road Trip Sports podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Make sure you find us on the socials. We are at Road Trip Sports Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Ollie, our TikTok wizard, our TikTok master, has cooked up some fantastic content for you to take a look at. I know he's got those top 5 Aaron Rodgers moments ready to go. We've also got some TikToks that will be posted throughout the week. NFL players as the Avengers is something that we've been talking about in our pre-show meeting. So stay on the lookout for all of the content that's going to be coming out soon. Now that we are back up and running, we're going to have much more regular content. We've got lots of plans of how to expand the podcast. Make sure you let us know what segments you like, didn't like. We're still playing around with the format, so willing to hear any constructive criticism about that. Thanks so much for listening. Anything else you want to say, Ollie?
I'll just say that if you can't tune into the podcast, feel free to check out. If you can't tune in the podcast for that week, or you only can tune in for half of it, or you got other commitments, just check out a couple of TikToks. I mean, we're going to try and provide a little bit of a summary, and we're going to go in depth. Well, basically, you'll be able to tune into the pod, and we'll go in depth about all the things that we've briefly mentioned in the TikToks. I'd just say that it's good to be having a chat, a bit of a chin wag, and hopefully we can put together something that's actually worth listening to all of you guys, and provide some a bit of insight on the cities that we have been to and the cities that we haven't been to. I'm sure we'll do a little bit of research, and we'll have a chat to some people that have been to those places and hopefully get some tips.
Yeah, it'd be great to, and we'll probably discuss this more in the future, but it'd be great to get some input from people who have been to those cities. So we're going to try and figure out ways to do that and ways to get different sort of guests on, maybe not guest stars like celebrities, but maybe some guests who've been to different cities and traveled around, and we can get their thoughts and opinions on that.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, that's it from us. Once again, make sure you follow us on all our socials at Road Trip Sports Pod. I've been Harrison Crook. This has been Oliver Gilmour. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.